Alright, so with 6.0, we are getting another 5-star standard selector, and I'm going to be going over all of the characters and which one you should actually pick. This will completely depend on your account, and it's just my opinion, so if I'm being honest, just pick who you want the most, but I'm going to give you a guide on who you should avoid, because there are quite a few characters that there isn't really a reason to get. Also, since we had the selector last anniversary, and so we're getting it this anniversary as well, and then with the 4 free constellations on the selected 5 stars, I will be going up to C2 for each of these characters. I will be making a video on which characters you should choose to get your 4 free constellations for. I would not really recommend any of the standard characters, as well there are limited characters you can choose, but you still can pick them if you want, and C3 really doesn't mean anything, so I'll be going up to C2 for each of these characters. And so we're going to start off with Diluc here, released at 1.0. These are his best weapons. A lot of these are, this one's limited battle pass, and in this one there's no way, I don't really see this being good. I would not recommend this. Wolf's Gravestone is also decent for semi free to play if you have it. You can also run the Mailed Flower, which was a Claymore event weapon a year or two ago. And so with artifacts, we have Crimson Witch at number 1 for ape teams as well as gilded, and then if you just have way better Shimenawa pieces, you can go 2-piece as well as 2-piece Crimson, 2-piece gilded. And then for the artifacts, you just go attack or EM, and then pyro damage, and then crit rate, crit damage. If you're running an attack scaling Claymore, then I'd recommend EM, especially if you're playing a vaporized team. And we are going to go into teams real quick down here. So Diluc's best teams, you have, this is the only team you should be running. You do need Shen Yun, which is a little niche, and then Farina and Bennett are 2 characters most players have. And then this is free-to-play version, but Shen Yun buffs Diluc so much with the plunging, as well as providing VV. Sucrose is the same, but this is really the only team you should be playing Diluc in. He's actually quite decent. He's not like anything meta, especially because we have Mavwika and Arlecchino. But this team is still good. Like, you can still clear with this team quite easily just because of how strong these 3 supports are. Talents, I'm not really going to go into normal attack and skill and such. And then the passives also not really. If you're going to be playing these, you're going to want to have them pretty much max. And then onto constellations, his C1 is quite useless. A lot of the older constellations are just terrible. 15% more damage to enemies HP who is above 50%. So pretty terrible. So if you only have C0, C1 isn't really good. And then C2, whenever he takes damage, he gets an attack speed increase and just an attack increase. You can get up to 3 stacks, so 30% attack and 15% attack speed with the 1.5 second interval. It's also not great, but since we're comparing to other standard characters, it's decent. And so Diluc is not a character I'd recommend. If you do have Shen Yun and Farina and you do like Diluc, this team is still good. It can still do pretty much anything you need to do. Alright, on to Jean. Jean actually had could glow up and when Farina dropped, just because she's a team-wide healer that heals a lot. Her best weapons here, you just want to get a bunch of attack on her because she's an attack scaler. You're pretty much going to want to always run Viridescent for the resistance shred. If you want to build a DPS Jean with burst, Noblesse can also be good. And if you want more healing, you can go Ocean Hued. And if for more DPS, you can do like 2 Shimenawa, 2 Viridescent. And then if you need energy recharge, you can also run Emblem, but energy recharge won't be that big of an issue. And your Sands, just attack or energy recharge, and Nemo Goblet, and then crit rate, crit damage for Circlet. You can also run healing bonus if you really need the heals, but if you want to increase Jean's damage, then crit is nice. I don't really like the teams that it shows here. Ganyu Freeze with Aloy and then Electro Charge. These teams are choices, I guess. I would personally recommend using Jean with Farina as a healer, so you can run her in a bunch of teams because she can shred resistance and heal. So in any leg slot I would recommend. And we're going to skip over her talents and then passives. And then constellations, her C1, it just affects her skill, 40% damage increase, and then increases the pulling speed. Not really anything special, I guess. If you want her skill to do bigger damage, not really something you're going to use that much. Her C2 is better though, is a nice support upgrade. Whenever she picks up energy, you get movement speed and attack speed, which this is the big part of this constellation. I actually got C2 Jean recently because I lost to Mavuika again. C2 Jean is definitely better than C2 Diluc. This constellation is actually quite good compared to the other standard. And I'm just going to touch on this briefly, but her C4 Anemo Res by 40% is quite strong. So if you do get her up to C4, I know I'm only supposed to be going up to C2, but C4 is a very strong constellation for a standard character. On to Keqing, which I might be picking just because I don't have Keqing on my main account, or my only account. I have every other standard character except for her, so I might be building her just for fun to have all the standard characters. For weapons, you just want the crit weapon because you're going to be building her as a main DPS. And then for more free to play, you can go Harbinger of Dawn, but you will need a strong shielder and or healer just because of the HP restriction. And then for artifacts, Thundering Fury, Electro DPS, it makes sense. Gilded, and then also 2-piece Shimenawa with Thundering. Thunder Soother is decent, I guess. If you're farming Thundering Fury, you're going to get Soother. 35% damage increase. I don't really think it's that great. I would definitely stick with Thundering Fury or Gilded for more aggravate teams. And then you'll be running Attack Sands, Electro, and then Crit. For teams, Keqing Aggravate is the best team that you can. So Aggravate is definitely her best team. You can run her in this Electro Charge or even Lunar Charge, I'm pretty sure, with the Nefa. And then Super Conduct for like physical build. I wouldn't really recommend this one. I don't know how good Keqing Electro Charge is with a Nefa, but Aggravate is definitely the best team that you should be using. And then also, if you're a whale and you have like a bunch of C6 characters and you pull them again and you get the new purple bottle thing, you can level characters up to 100, which will massively increase the Dendro damage reactions. So that is something to take into account if you are a mega whale. And then their constellations are not really good at all. For C2 has a 50% chance of producing a single particle once every 5 seconds. This is completely useless as Fischl is a very great battery for Keqing, and her burst is only 40 energy cost anyway. So energy is not going to be an issue. So C2 here is pretty much useless. C1, just an extra bit of electro damage, nothing really. C1 and C2 are quite bad, so I would not recommend really getting constellations for her. So I would really only recommend Keqing if you don't have her at all, which is why I might get her. We'll have to see on how I feel like closer to the update. Alright, next up is Mona, a support character. I run her in my Ayaka team since I don't have Farina. Thrilling Tales is pretty much what you'll want to be running just for the attack buff. And then Noblesse or Tenacity is what I'd recommend, just to get even more attack for your main DPS. And then just go for energy recharge or attack. You won't have enough energy recharge to get her burst up, and then hydro damage or attack, and then crit rate circlet if you want to run like Codex. And then for teams, you can run her in like Ganyu Freeze team or Ayaka Freeze. You definitely want to replace Diona with Escoffier, and then Venti with Yelan or Shenhe or something like that. There's also the main DPS team, which I don't really know why you'd play this. This is more of just a for fun build. and like a nuke. Running her in Ica Freeze is probably her best team. You can also run her with Mulan as a buffer, but the best Mulan team is Sucrose, Shenlanger, Mavuika, and then Shalonen. But Mona is definitely a choice if you have Mulan. On to Constellations. Her C1 is quite big. It affects multiple different teams. Electro charge damage isn't really useful though. Vaporize damage is good for, I said earlier, Mulan. Hydro Swirl by 15 isn't really anything. And then this frozen thing, I'm pretty sure is bugged. I heard that somewhere, so it's really just for the vaporize damage, so it's actually not that great. And then her C2 is completely useless in my opinion, unless you're playing her as like a trolled main DPS build. So her C1 is decent, the vaporize damage is nice, and then she is overall a decent support character. She is the character I picked last year, and then with Ica and Escoffier and Gurk and all the Freeze becoming a prominent team, she definitely still has her place to be used. On to Chi-Chi. I'm not gonna talk much about her just because she's not a character I would recommend really anyone to pick. I'll go over it quickly. You can run like Tenacity for an attack buff, or Ocean Hued to help her healing, or Maiden as well. And then Sack Sword for the extra skill and energy recharge. And then just run full attack pretty much, or energy recharge if you want to get her burst up. And the teams here are quite random, probably because no one plays Chi-Chi. But any cryo slot that you need for like support or healer, I guess you can run her. Chi-Chi is definitely a character I would not recommend. For C1, 20% healing bonus after they do an elemental reaction. And then her C1 just regenerates 2 energy, and then her normal and charge attack damage. These constellations are pretty much useless. Overall, no real point in getting Chi-Chi unless you like her. So on to the newer standard character, starting with Tignari. Definitely the best DPS on the standard banner. Wanderer's Troop or Gilded are definitely the best. The Wanderers for the charge attack damage because he's a charge attack DPS. His signature is obviously the best, or just any crit like bow will work good on him. And then Sans, Attacker EM, Dendro Goblet, and then Crit Rate or Crit Damage Circlet. You can probably go more heavy into crit damage just because bow characters can get guaranteed crits on some enemies for hitting weak points. And then for his teams, they have him as a sub DPS and Kaching Aggravate, or you could play him as a main DPS. You can swap Kale for Nahida, and this team is decent. I'll go into his constellations. He actually does get a big buff from one of his early constellations. So his C1 is extra crit rate, so you can go even more heavy on crit damage. And then his C2 gives him basically 20% danger damage bonus for 6 seconds. And this is actually quite a big damage increase. I still think C0 All Hate Them is better than C2 Tignari, and All Hate Them is coming back on the Chronicled Wish banner. Overall, C2 Tignari clears any of the other DPS characters, even at C3 or C4. So if you want still a decent DPS character, Tignari is quite good at C2. I do have him at C1, so he might be an option for me. I do have All Hate Them already, but if I do want to build Tignari randomly, I might just pick up his C2. Alright, on to Dia. Dia was honestly just a complete flop, I'll go over her. I do have her at C0. I also might consider getting her C1 just to make her not completely terrible. I do like Dia. Dia is one of my favorite characters from Sumeru. It just sucks that she's, in my opinion, one of the worst characters on the standard banner. You can run her on Tenacity for the extra HP and the attack bonus because her elemental skill just places on the field. You can also run this 4-piece set, I'm pretty sure. If you want to build her as a DPS, you can build her as an instructor support, or these sets. I don't really know why. I would not recommend these. yeah, tenacity, or I'm not even going to pronounce this, or instructor support. Instructor support would actually be good again with Mulaney. You can run Mulaney, Dia, Sucrose, Shalonen, and then the instructor for even more EM for the vape damage. And you want to go pretty much full HP on Dia. Only team it shows here is Ganyu Melt, but the Mulaney team also works well. You can play her as a main DPS if you want. She's not a good DPS, but you could probably run something. To be honest, I'm not even sure because her burst doesn't allow Singsho or Yelan's off field to proc, so it has to be a Pyro or a Melt team. So Dia, Bennett, and then Kaya Rosaria or something. That team doesn't really sound that strong. Jangling would just be better, but Dia is not too great. C1 does buff her quite a bit with the max HP increase, and then she just gets more scaling on her skill and burst. This is the reason I might get her, just to make her not completely unusable. And if I do decide on getting this, I will make a video actually fully building her on my channel. And then her C2 just buffs her skill damage by 50%, and then also increases how long it stays on the field, so she gets more uptime for 4 seconds. If we look up, the overall C2 is kind of mid. C1 is buffs her quite a bit. She's still not anything good, but definitely a fun character. Overall, this is a lot of people's favorite character, just she's not very great. And finally on to Mizuki. I got her recently by losing my 50, or I got her on standard banner, that's what it was. So pretty much just run Viridescent. She's an on-field driver, and then her signature, or you just want to run a bunch of EM on her. So just full EM or energy recharge if you want to get her burst up more. She doesn't even have team section, so I'll just go straight into her constellations. C1 doesn't really seem like anything. It increases swirl damage by 900% of her EM, but swirl damage is meaningless, doesn't really do much. And then her C2 actually does seem decent for each point of EM she increases elemental damage bonus by 0.04%, which I'm guessing if you have 1000 EM, it's like 40%, which is quite good. But as far as I know, Mizuki is not a very great character, and so if you want to get her C2 actually sounds decent for her and team buffing. But if you only have her at C0, C1 is definitely not worth it in my opinion. And overall, if you like her, you can get her, but I would not recommend. So now that I've gone over all of them, I'll rank them, I guess. So I think Tighnari is definitely the best to get, then Jean, then Keqing. I put Mono over Keqing actually. Chi-Chi definitely last, then Dia, and then Mizuki here, I guess. So Tighnari, the best in my opinion, then Jean. You can honestly argue Jean to be over, but I don't know about as much now, since there are just so many more characters that have come out since she got buffed with Farina. Then Mona, still a good support, but Farina just kind of outclasses her. Then Keqing, Diluc, Mizuki, Dia, and Chi-Chi. I don't know too much about Mizuki. She might be better than Diluc. I'm not really sure though. But overall though, just pick who you want. None of these characters are really anything insane, and I'm still not sure who I'm gonna pick, but whoever I pick, I will definitely be making a video on them.